On a snowy Christmas Eve, Jaslyn meets Ben, quiet, kind, and nothing like the billionaires hiding in Chicago's North Shore. But when a news report reveals his true identity, she must ask, was the love real or just charity? Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. The wind howled through the streets of Chicago as Jaslyn Carter pulled her thin coat tighter around her slender frame. Christmas Eve shouldn't be this cold, she thought. Hurrying past the brightly decorated storefronts, the sidewalks were nearly empty now. Everyone else was already home with their families, opening presents and drinking hot cocoa by the fire. Everyone except her. Jaslyn checked her watch. Almost 4 o'clock. She picked up her pace, her worn boots slipping slightly on the icy sidewalk. She couldn't be late for her shift at St. Martin's shelter. It was the one place she felt needed, especially today. "Just in time," called out Martha, the shelter coordinator, as Jaslyn pushed through the heavy doors. The warmth inside hit her like a wave, along with the smell of turkey and spices. "We've got a full house tonight, honey." Jaslyn smiled, unwinding her scarf. "Wouldn't miss it for the world." "I know you wouldn't," Martha said, giving her shoulder a squeeze. "You've been our most reliable volunteer since your father passed." The mention of her dad sent a familiar pang through Jaslyn's chest. 2 years wasn't long enough to dull that particular pain. Christmas had been his favorite holiday. After he died, Jaslyn couldn't bear to celebrate alone in their small apartment. The shelter had become her refuge, a place where she could honor his memory by serving others the way he'd taught her. "Let me grab an apron," Jaslyn said, heading toward the back. Martha called after her, "Oh, and Jaslyn, the mystery donor came through again this year. Double what he gave last year. Can you believe it?" Jaslyn smiled. The anonymous donor was something of a legend at St. Martin's. For the past 5 years, just before Christmas, a massive donation would arrive, enough to fund new beds, better heating, and special holiday meals. All anyone knew was that it came from somewhere on the North Shore, that wealthy stretch of lakefront, where Chicago's elite lived in mansions behind high gates. "Maybe one day we'll get to thank him in person," Jaslyn said, tying her apron strings. "Fat chance of that," Martha laughed. "Rich folks don't like to get their hands dirty, they just write the checks." Jaslyn was assigned to table 5, serving mashed potatoes and gravy. She fell into an easy rhythm, scooping generous portions onto plates while exchanging warm greetings with the shelter guests. Many were regulars she knew by name, like Old, Mike with his Vietnam veteran cap, and Darlene, who always asked for extra gravy for the road. She was so focused on her task that she didn't notice the tall figure who had slipped into the serving line beside her until he spoke. "I think you need a refill." Jaslyn looked up, startled. The man nodded toward her nearly empty mashed potato container. He was holding a fresh one, steam still rising from the top. "Oh, thank you," she said, taking it from him. He was tall, with broad shoulders under a red flannel shirt. His dark hair was slightly too long, curling at the edges, and his jaw was covered in stubble that looked more like neglect than style. But it was his eyes that caught her attention, deep blue and somehow older than the rest of him, which she guessed to be around 30. There was something haunted in those eyes. "I haven't seen you here before," she said, continuing to serve as the line moved forward. "First time," he replied, picking up a serving spoon and falling in beside her without being asked. "I'm Ben." "Just Ben?" she asked with a small smile. A shadow crossed his face. "Just Ben is fine." Jaslyn nodded. Many volunteers preferred anonymity. "I'm Jaslyn. Thanks for the help, Ben. We're short-staffed tonight." For the next hour, they worked side by side in comfortable silence. Ben was efficient and attentive, noticing when plates were empty before even Martha did. Jaslyn couldn't help stealing glances at him. Despite his simple clothes, the flannel shirt, worn jeans, and scuffed boots, there was something about the way he carried himself. A quiet confidence. And those hands. They were too smooth for someone who worked with them regularly. "So what brings you here on Christmas Eve?" she finally asked during a lull. "Most people are home with family." A muscle tightened in his jaw. "I don't have much family." "Not anymore." "I'm sorry," she said, feeling an unexpected connection. "Me either. My dad passed away 2 years ago, and my mom, well, she left when I was 15 and never looked back." Ben's eyes met hers, and for a moment, Jaslyn felt like he could see right through her, past the cheerful volunteer facade to the lonely woman beneath. "Their loss," he said quietly. Before she could respond, Martha called out that they were opening the doors for the second dinner shift. The moment was gone, replaced by the rush of new guests filing in from the bitter cold. As the evening progressed, Jaslyn found herself growing more intrigued by the mysterious Ben. He didn't talk much, but when he did, he spoke directly, without the small talk most people fell back on, and there was something else, the way the shelter guests responded to him. Unlike some first-time volunteers who approached the homeless with awkward pity, Ben looked each person in the eye, spoke to them with genuine respect. "You're good at this," she told him, as they refilled the gravy boat together. "At what, pouring gravy?" The corner of his mouth lifted slightly. "At making people feel seen," she said. "Not everyone can do that." He looked away, almost uncomfortable with the compliment. "I've been invisible before. It's not a good feeling." Jaslyn wanted to ask what he meant, but Martha appeared with dessert trays, and they were swept back into the rhythm of serving by 9 o'clock. The main dinner service was complete. Volunteers were clearing tables while the overnight guests began settling in. Jaslyn and Ben found themselves washing dishes side by side in the industrial kitchen. "So what do you do, Ben, when you're not serving mashed potatoes to strangers on Christmas Eve?" she asked, handing him a dripping plate. He took a moment before answering, methodically drying the plate. "I'm between things right now." "Ah," she nodded. "Join the club. I work at Brennan's bookshop during the day, but it's just to pay the bills. I'm trying to figure out what I really want to do." "And what's that?" he asked, his full attention on her now. Jaslyn hesitated. She rarely shared her dreams with anyone. "I'd like to open a place like this someday. Not just a shelter, but a transition center, somewhere people could learn skills, find jobs, get back on their feet." "Why don't you?" he asked. She laughed, but it came out more bitter than she intended. "Money, mostly. Places like that need funding, and funding means convincing rich people to care about strangers." Something flashed across Ben's face, so quickly she almost missed it. "Some do care," he said quietly. "Like our mystery donor?" Jaslyn smiled. "Yeah, I guess some do. From a distance, anyway." They finished the dishes in silence. As they hung up their aprons, Martha approached with a clipboard. "Jaslyn, honey, would you mind locking up tonight? My grandson's Christmas pageant is in an hour, and I still need to get across town." "Of course," Jaslyn said, taking the keys. "Go, I've got this." "Thank you, dear. You're an angel." Martha turned to Ben. "And thank you for your help tonight." "Young man, will we see you again?" Ben glanced at Jaslyn before answering. "I think you might." After Martha left, only a few volunteers remained, finishing the last of the cleanup. One by one, they too said their goodbyes, until only Jaslyn and Ben were left. "You don't have to stay," she told him, wiping down the serving counter. "I just need to do a final check and lock the doors." "I don't mind," he said, gathering trash bags. "Unless you want me to go?" "No," she said, surprised by how quickly she answered. "I mean, the company is nice, especially tonight." They worked together to finish the cleanup, and Jaslyn couldn't help noticing how easily they fell into sync, anticipating each other's movements without having to speak. It had been a long time since she'd felt this comfortable around someone new. As they completed the final walkthrough, snow began falling outside, visible through the large windows at the front of the shelter. Large, fluffy flakes drifted down, softening the harsh city landscape. "It's beautiful," Jaslyn said, pausing to watch. Ben stood beside her, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from him. "My father used to say that snow on Christmas Eve was the world's way of giving everyone a fresh start," she said, softly. "Do you believe that?" Ben asked. "In fresh starts?" Jaslyn thought about it. "I want to. But sometimes the past has a way of following you, doesn't it?" Ben's face grew serious. "Yes, it does." They stood in silence for a moment, watching the snow transform the world outside. "I should probably get going," Jaslyn finally said, reluctant to end the evening. "The last bus to my neighborhood leaves in 20 minutes. "You're taking the bus? In this weather?" Ben frowned. "Let me call you a car." "That's really not necessary. Please," he insisted. "It's late, and it's getting worse out there." Before she could protest further, he pulled out a sleek phone, much nicer than she would have expected, and tapped the screen a few times. "It'll be here in 3 minutes," he said. "Thank you," she said, surprised by the gesture. "That's very kind." As they walked to the door, Ben suddenly asked, "Would you like to get coffee sometime, or dinner maybe?" Jaslyn looked up at him, caught off guard. Dating wasn't something she did much of these days. Between work and volunteering, she'd convinced herself she didn't have time. But there was something about Ben. "I'd like that," she said. His smile transformed his face, erasing the haunted look in his eyes, if only for a moment. "Tomorrow's Christmas, but maybe the day after, around 6. "Perfect." She pulled out her phone. "Let me give you my number." He hesitated for just a second before taking her phone and entering his contact information, then calling his own phone. So he'd have hers. Outside, a black car pulled up to the curb. "That's your ride," Ben said, opening the door for her. "You're not like the others," she murmured, thinking about how different he was from the usual volunteers. He smiled faintly, his eyes on her, not the line of people who had come and gone all evening. "Neither are you." Jaslyn slipped into the car, warmed by his words in a way that had nothing to do with the heated seats. As the driver pulled away from the curb, she glanced back. Ben stood in the doorway of the shelter, watching her go, snowflakes catching in his dark hair. For the first time in 2 years, Christmas Eve didn't feel quite so lonely. Back at the shelter, Ben closed the door against the cold and pulled out his phone. The screen lit up with notifications, dozens of missed calls and messages. One in particular caught his eye. A news alert from Forbes with the headline, "Ashford Empire Crumbling Under Mystery Heir's Disappearance." He swiped it away quickly, his jaw tight. He'd left his penthouse 3 weeks ago, cutting all contact with the board, with his assistant, with everyone. They could wait a little longer. For the first time in a year, since the accident that took his sister and the betrayal that nearly destroyed his company, he'd felt something real tonight, something that money couldn't buy. He looked at Jaslyn's number on his phone and saved it under simply J. Then he tucked the phone away and pulled his worn jacket tighter around his shoulders. As he stepped out into the snowy night, he silently prayed she would never find out who he really was, at least not until she knew who he really was. Ben Ashford, the billionaire CEO, could wait. Tonight, he was just Ben. And for now, that was enough. Christmas Day dawned bright and cold in Chicago. Jaslyn woke to sunlight streaming through her small apartment window, reflecting off the fresh snow outside. For a moment, she lay still, savoring the quiet. Then memories of the previous night flooded back: the shelter, the busy dinner service, and Ben with his haunted blue eyes and unexpected kindness. She smiled, reaching for her phone on the nightstand. There was a new message from an unknown number. "Merry Christmas, Jaslyn, looking forward to tomorrow." Ben, such a simple text, but it made her heart beat a little faster. She typed back, "Merry Christmas to you too. See you at 6. Normally, Christmas Day stretched endlessly before her, filled with attempts to distract herself from the emptiness of the apartment. Today felt different. She hummed as she made coffee, then curled up on her worn couch with the book she'd been meaning to finish. Across town, in a luxury hotel suite overlooking Lake Michigan, Ben Ashford sat at a desk covered with documents. His laptop was open to financial reports that showed the Ashford Corporation stock dropping another 2 points since yesterday. His phone buzzed constantly with messages from his executive team, his lawyers, even his therapist. He ignored them all, his thoughts fixed on Jaslyn Carter. Her smile, the gentle way she'd spoken to each person who came through the dinner line, the sadness that flickered behind her eyes when she mentioned her father. His own phone chimed with her reply to his message. He read it twice, smiling to himself. Then he turned back to the pile of documents, his expression hardening. There was something he needed to take care of before tomorrow night. He picked up the hotel phone. "This is Mr. Smith in Suite 1245. I need a courier service, please, immediately." The following evening, Jaslyn stood in front of her closet, frowning at her limited options. She rarely went on dates, and when she did, They were usually casual coffee meetings that didn't work out, but something told her this one might be different. She finally settled on a simple green sweater that her father once said matched her eyes paired with her only nice jeans. Nothing fancy, but it would have to do. Ben had suggested a small Italian restaurant in Lincoln Park. When Jaslyn arrived, she was relieved to find it wasn't one of those upscale places where she'd feel out of her element. It was cozy and warm, with checkered tablecloths and soft lighting. Ben was already waiting, seated at a corner table. He stood when he saw her, and Jaslyn's breath caught. He was dressed simply again, dark jeans and a navy blue sweater, but there was no denying how handsome he was. The haunted look in his eyes was still there, but when he smiled at her, it retreated just a bit. "You look beautiful," he said as she approached. "Thank you." She felt her cheeks warm. "This place is lovely. I hoped you'd like it. The owner, Mario, makes the best lasagna in Chicago." As if on cue, an older man with a thick Italian accent approached their table. "Ben, my friend, and who is this lovely lady?" Ben stood to shake the man's hand. "Mario, this is Jaslyn." Mario took her hand in both of his. "Bellissima. Any friend of Ben's is family here. I will bring you my special wine on the house." After he bustled away, Jaslyn raised an eyebrow. "You seem to know him well." Ben shrugged. "I found this place a few weeks ago, been coming here a lot." "Only a few weeks? You're not from Chicago?" There was that slight hesitation again. "I grew up here, actually, North Shore, but I've been away for a while." Before she could ask more, Mario returned with wine and began describing the evening's specials with dramatic gestures. By the time he left, the moment had passed. Their conversation flowed easily over dinner. Ben asked about her job at the bookstore, and Jaslyn found herself telling him more than she usually shared with people she'd just met. How she'd taken the job after her father died, because being surrounded by books reminded her of him. How the owner, Mrs. Brennan, had become something of a surrogate mother to her. "She sounds like an amazing woman," Ben said. "She is. The store isn't doing great, though. Online sales are killing small bookshops everywhere." Jaslyn sighed. "She might have to close next year." Ben frowned. "That's a shame. Those places are important to communities." "What about you?" Jaslyn asked, eager to shift the focus. "You said you're between things. What did you do before?" Ben took a sip of wine before answering. "Family business, but there was a disagreement about the direction of the company. So you left?" "Needed some distance to figure things out." He changed the subject quickly, asking about her dream of opening a transition center. To her surprise, he asked detailed questions about how such a place would operate, what services it would offer, even what kind of building would be ideal. "You've really thought this through," he said, impressed. Jaslyn smiled. "I've had a lot of time to dream about it, but dreams don't pay the bills." "Sometimes they do," Ben said quietly, "if you believe in them enough." There was something in his voice, a certainty that made her wonder who he really was. But every time she tried to ask about his past, he gently steered the conversation elsewhere. By the time they finished dessert, a tiramisu that Mario insisted they try, Jaslyn felt like she'd known Ben for much longer than just 2 days. There was an ease between them, a comfort she couldn't explain. "Let me walk you home," Ben said as they left the restaurant. "It's pretty far," she warned. "I don't mind." The night was clear and cold, the streets quiet after the holiday. As they walked, their hands brushed once, twice, before Ben finally took hers in his. His hand was warm and strong, and Jaslyn felt a flutter in her chest that had nothing to quiesce. "Do with the cold. Thank you for tonight," she said, breaking a comfortable silence. "I can't remember the last time I enjoyed Christmas this much." Ben squeezed her hand gently. "Me neither." When they reached her apartment building, a modest brick structure in a neighborhood that had seen better days, Ben looked up at the facade with an unreadable expression. "This is me," Jaslyn said, suddenly self-conscious about the peeling paint and broken buzzer panel. "Can I see you again tomorrow?" Ben asked. The directness of his question made her smile. "I'd like that, but I work until 6. "I'll pick you up at the bookstore," he said. "If that's okay?" "It's perfect." He hesitated, then leaned down and kissed her cheek, his lips warm against her cold skin. Good night, Jaslyn. She watched him walk away, wondering how a man she'd just met could make her feel so seen, so understood. For the first time in years, something like hope bloomed in her chest. Brennan's bookshop was tucked between a laundromat and a convenience store on a quiet street in Old Town. Its windows were crowded with books, a faded "open" sign hanging in the door. Inside, the smell of old paper and dust filled the air. Jaslyn loved it here. She moved between the cramped aisles, reshelving books and helping the occasional customer. Today, her mind kept drifting to Ben, their dinner. The way he listened when she spoke, really listened. "You're smiling more than usual today," Mrs. Brennan observed from behind the counter. She was a small woman in her 70s with silver hair and bright, shrewd eyes behind thick glasses. "Am I?" Jaslyn tried to sound casual. Does it have anything to do with that handsome young man who's been standing outside for the last 10 minutes? Jaslyn's head snapped up. She hurried to the window and peered out. Sure enough, Ben was there, leaning against a lamppost across the street. He was watching the bookstore with a thoughtful expression. "I'll be back in a minute," Jaslyn told Mrs. Brennan, grabbing her coat. The bell above the door jingled as she stepped outside. Ben straightened when he saw her, looking slightly embarrassed. "I'm early," he said. "I didn't want to disturb you at work." "How long have you been out here?" He checked his watch. "Not long." But something about the way he avoided her eyes told Jaslyn he'd been there longer than he was admitting. "Come inside," she said. "It's freezing out here." Ben hesitated. "Are you sure it's okay?" "Of course. Mrs. Brennan would love to meet you." Inside, Mrs. Brennan was waiting with undisguised curiosity. Jaslyn made the introductions, noticing how Ben's eyes took in every detail of the shop, the sagging shelves, the worn carpet, the ancient heating system chugging valiantly in the corner. "So you're the young man who's put a smile back on our—" "Jaslyn's face," Mrs. Brennan said bluntly. "Mrs. Brennan." Jaslyn felt her face heat up. Ben smiled, a genuine smile that reached his eyes. "I'm trying my best, ma'am." "Good. She deserves it." The older woman looked him up and down appraisingly. "You look like a reader. What do you like?" "History, mostly, and biographies." Mrs. Brennan nodded approvingly. "A man who wants to learn from the past. That's a good sign." She glanced at the clock. "Jaslyn, why don't you go a bit early today? I can handle the closing." "Are you sure?" "Of course, we've had all of 3 customers today." Mrs. Brennan waved her hand dismissively. "Go enjoy yourselves." As they left the shop, Ben turned to Jaslyn. "She reminds me of my grandmother, direct, no nonsense." "She's been like a mother to me these past few years," Jaslyn admitted. "I don't know what I'd do without her." Ben nodded, his expression serious. "People like that are rare. You should hold on to them." "So what's the plan for tonight?" she asked, eager to lighten the mood. "I thought maybe we could go to Navy Pier. They still have the Christmas lights up." It was the perfect evening. They rode the Ferris wheel under a sky sprinkled with stars, ate hot pretzels while walking along the pier, and talked for hours about everything and nothing. Ben told her about growing up with a sister who was his best friend, though he grew quiet when Jaslyn asked where she was now. "She died," he said finally. "A car accident about a year ago." "I'm so sorry," Jaslyn said, her heart aching for him. Now she understood some of the sadness in his eyes. "It was my fault," he said, his voice so low she barely heard it. "I was supposed to pick her up that night, but I got caught up in a meeting. An important client. She took a cab, and the driver was drunk." Jaslyn took his hand. "That wasn't your fault, Ben." He looked away. "Try telling that to my conscience." Later, as they stood watching the lights reflect off the frozen lake, Ben suddenly asked, "Do you ever wish you could just start over? Be someone completely different?" Jaslyn considered the question. "Sometimes. After my dad died, I thought about moving away, changing my name, becoming someone new. But then I realized all my problems would just follow me." "What if they didn't, though?" Ben pressed. "What if you could really leave everything behind?" There was an intensity in his voice that made her look at him more closely. "Is that what you're doing? Leaving everything behind?" For a moment, she thought he might tell her the truth, whatever that was, but then his expression closed off again, just thinking out loud. As they walked back toward her apartment, Jaslyn couldn't shake the feeling that Ben was carrying a burden much heavier than grief alone. Over the next week, they fell into a pattern. Ben would meet her after work, and they'd explore the city together, finding hidden restaurants, walking through museums, even ice skating in Millennium Park. He never talked about money, but Jaslyn noticed he always had enough to pay for whatever they did without being flashy about it. On New Year's Eve, Ben surprised her with tickets to a jazz club. As they swayed together on the dance floor, his arms around her waist, Jaslyn realized she was falling for him. This mysterious man who listened so intently, who looked at her like she was the only person in the room, yet kept parts of himself locked away. "What are you thinking?" he asked, his breath warm against her ear. "That I'm afraid to trust this," she admitted. "It feels too good to be true." Ben pulled back slightly to look at her. "I'm real, Jaslyn. This is real." When the countdown to midnight began, they joined in with the crowd. As the new year arrived, Ben cupped her face in his hands and kissed her, softly at first, then with an intensity that took her breath away. "Happy New Year," he whispered against her lips. In that moment, Jaslyn decided to let go of her doubts and simply trust what she felt. Whatever secrets Ben was keeping, she would give him time to share them when he was ready. The following morning, Jaslyn woke to a text from Ben asking if she wanted to meet for brunch. She smiled, typing back an enthusiastic yes. She decided to stop by the shelter first. Martha had asked for help organizing donations that had come in over the holidays. The streets were quiet, most people still recovering from New Year's celebrations. As she passed a diner, a familiar voice from a television inside caught her attention. Jaslyn slowed, then stopped. Through the window, she could see a news program playing on a TV mounted on the wall. The continued absence of Benjamin Ashford, CEO of Ashford Technologies, has investors increasingly concerned, a reporter was saying. Sources close to the company suggest that Ashford has not been seen at corporate headquarters for over a month. The screen changed to show a photograph, and Jaslyn felt her world tilt sideways. There, dressed in an expensive suit instead of a red flannel shirt, was Ben. Her Ben. Ashford, 30, took over the company following his father's death 3 years ago, the reporter continued. Under his leadership, Ashford Technologies has become a leader in sustainable energy solutions, with Ben Ashford's personal fortune estimated at over $2 billion. Jaslyn stared at the screen in disbelief. $2 billion. The mystery. Donor at the shelter. The way he always had just enough money. His reluctance to talk about his past. It all suddenly made horrifying sense. She backed away from the window, bumping into a passerby who gave her an irritated look. Her phone buzzed. In her pocket, another text from Ben asking which restaurant she preferred. Anger and humiliation washed over her in equal measure. All this time he'd been lying to her, playing some kind of game, pretending to be just an ordinary guy while he was actually one of the richest men in Chicago. Was that why he'd approached her at the shelter? Some kind of billionaire's holiday? Charity project? With shaking hands, Jaslyn pulled out her phone and typed, "I know who you are, Ben Ashford, don't contact me again." Then she turned off her phone, tears blurring her vision as she walked blindly toward the shelter, wondering how she could have been so naive, so foolish, to believe that someone like him could truly care for someone like her. Ben stared at Jaslyn's message, his heart sinking. He had known this moment might come, but he hadn't expected it to happen so soon. He tried calling her immediately, but the call went straight to voicemail. She had turned off her phone, damn it, he muttered, pacing the hotel room. Everything had been going so well. For the first time since Claire's death, he had felt like himself again. Not Benjamin Ashford, the billionaire CEO, just Ben. A man falling in love with a woman who saw him for who he really was. Now, it was all falling apart. He grabbed his jacket and headed out. He knew where she would go, the shelter. It was her safe place, just like it had become his. The January air hit his face like a slap as he stepped outside. Snow was beginning to fall again, large flakes that clung to his hair and shoulders as he walked quickly through the streets. He needed to explain, to make her understand that he hadn't been playing some cruel game. That what they had was real. When he reached St. Martin's, he paused outside, suddenly uncertain. What if she didn't want to see him? What if she wouldn't listen? Taking a deep breath, he pushed open the door. Martha looked up from the reception desk, her face brightening. "Ben, good to see you again, here to volunteer." "Actually, I'm looking for Jaslyn. Is she here?" Martha's smile faded slightly. "She was, but she left about 20 minutes ago. She seemed upset. Did something happen?" Ben ran a hand through his hair, snow melting under his fingers. "It's complicated. Do you know where she went?" "She mentioned the bookstore, said she needed to talk to Mrs. Brennan." "Thanks, Martha." He turned to leave, then stopped. "When she comes back, could you tell her I'm looking for her, that I need to explain?" Martha studied him with shrewd eyes. "I'll tell her. But only if you tell me what's going on. That girl is like family to me." Ben hesitated, then nodded. "She found out who I really am, that I'm not just some guy named Ben." Understanding dawned on Martha's face. "You're the donor, aren't you? The one who's been supporting the shelter all these years?" He nodded. "Well, I'll be," Martha said softly. "But why hide it?" Ben looked away. "Because people treat you differently when they know you have money. They see the wallet, not the person." Martha's expression softened. "And you didn't want Jaslyn to see you that way?" "No. I wanted her to know me, the real me. Honey, the real you includes all of it. Your money, your company, everything. You can't just pick and choose the parts you want people to see." Ben knew she was right, but it didn't make the situation any easier. "I need to find her. I need to explain." Martha nodded. "Go on then. But Ben, give her time. Finding out someone isn't who you thought they were, that's not easy to get past." At Brennan's bookshop, Jaslyn sat in the back room, a cup of tea growing cold in her hands. Mrs. Brennan had taken one look at her tear-stained face and ushered her into the small office behind the shop. "He lied to me," Jaslyn said, her voice hollow. "All this time, he's not some regular guy looking for a fresh start. He's Benjamin Ashford, the billionaire." Mrs. Brennan sat across from her, listening patiently. "And this changes how you feel about him?" Jaslyn looked up, surprised by the question. "Of course it does. He made me believe he was just Ben, someone like me. But he's been living a completely different life, playing pretend. Did he ever actually lie to you? Or did he just leave things out?" Jaslyn frowned. "What's the difference? He let me believe something that wasn't true." "Maybe he had his reasons," Mrs. Brennan suggested gently. "Rich people don't have it easy when it comes to knowing who really cares about them and who just wants their money. So that makes it okay to deceive me." Jaslyn stood up, pacing the small room. "I trusted him. I told him things I've never told anyone else. And all that time he was keeping this huge secret. People are complicated, dear. We all have parts of ourselves we don't share right away. This isn't like not mentioning a bad haircut in high school," Jaslyn said bitterly. "He's one of the richest men in Chicago." The bell over the shop door jingled and Mrs. Brennan rose. "Let me check on that. You stay here and drink your tea." Alone, Jaslyn tried to sort through her tangled emotions. Anger, hurt, embarrassment. But underneath it all was a painful realization. She missed him already. Despite the lies, despite the deception, there had been something real between them. She had felt it, but how could she trust him now? Mrs. Brennan returned, her expression carefully neutral. "There's someone here to see you." Jaslyn's heart skipped. "I don't want to see him." "It's not Ben, dear. It's a woman named Elaine Porter. Says she's from Ashford Technologies." Confused, Jaslyn followed Mrs. Brennan into the shop. A tall, elegant woman in a tailored suit stood near the counter, looking out of place among the dusty bookshelves. Her hair was pulled back in a severe bun, and she wore glasses that did nothing to soften her sharp features. "Ms. Carter, I'm Elaine Porter, Mr. Ashford's executive assistant." The woman's voice was as crisp as her appearance. "May I have a word?" Jaslyn crossed her arms. "If Ben sent you to apologize for him, Mr. Ashford doesn't know I'm here," Elaine interrupted. "In fact, he would be quite upset if he knew." That caught Jaslyn off guard. "Then why are you here?" Elaine glanced at Mrs. Brennan, who took the hint and busied herself with arranging books at the far end of the shop. "I've worked for the Ashford family for 15 years, Elaine said, turning back to Jaslyn. "I knew Ben's father, And I was there when Ben took over the company after his death. I was there when his sister Claire died last year, and I've never seen him as lost as he's been these past few months. Jaslyn didn't know how to respond. This wasn't what she had expected. Until recently, Elaine continued, the past week he's been different. Lighter, he's been smiling again because of you, Ms. Carter. If you're trying to make me feel guilty, I'm not here to make you feel anything, Elaine said sharply. I'm here to tell you the truth about Ben Ashford. Not the billionaire CEO the media portrays, but the man I've watched grow up. Despite herself, Jaslyn was curious. Go on. Ben never wanted to run Ashford Technologies. That was his father's dream. Ben wanted to design sustainable housing for low-income communities, but when Richard Ashford died, Ben stepped up because his family needed him. He poured everything into making the company succeed. Elaine's voice softened. Then Claire died. They were incredibly close. She was his anchor, the one person who saw past his title to the real him. After the accident, he blamed himself, started working 20-hour days, sleeping at the office. He was destroying himself. What does this have to do with him lying to me? Jaslyn asked, though with less heat than before. Ben didn't disappear to play games with people's feelings, Ms. Carter. He disappeared because he was breaking down. His therapist actually suggested it. Take some time away from being Benjamin Ashford, reconnect with what matters. Jaslyn remembered Ben's words on the pier. Do you ever wish you could just start over? Be someone completely different? The company is in good hands, Elaine continued. The board is managing day-to-day operations. Ben needed this time, and then he met you. Jaslyn sank into a nearby chair, the anger that had sustained her beginning to fade. Why are you telling me all this? Elaine adjusted her glasses. Because Ben Ashford is a good man who has lost too much already. And because, Ms. Carter, I believe you care about him too. Before Jaslyn could respond, the shop door opened again. This time it was Ben who stood there, his hair damp from snow, his expression changing from hope to confusion when he saw Elaine. Elaine, what are you doing here? The assistant straightened, professional mask back in place. Just some business matters that couldn't wait, Mr. Ashford. I was about to leave. She nodded to Jaslyn, then walked past Ben. At the door, she paused. The board meeting is scheduled for next Monday. They're expecting you back. After she left, an uncomfortable silence filled the shop. Mrs. Brennan discreetly disappeared into the back room, leaving Ben and Jaslyn alone. I'm sorry, Ben said. Finally. I should have told you the truth from the beginning. Jaslyn looked at him, really looked at him. He was still the same person she had laughed with, danced with, kissed on New Year's Eve. But now she saw the weight he carried, the burden of responsibility and guilt that had been there all along. Why didn't you? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Ben moved closer, stopping a few feet away as if afraid to crowd her. Because for the first time in my life, someone was seeing me. Just me. Not my family name, not my company, not my bank account. Do you know how rare that is? You didn't give me the chance to prove I wouldn't care about those things, Jaslyn said. Wouldn't you, though? Be honest, Jaslyn. If I had walked into that shelter and introduced myself as Benjamin Ashford, CEO of Ashford Technologies, would you have treated me the same? She wanted to say yes, but honesty compelled her to shake her head. Probably not. I'd have been intimidated or suspicious of your motives. That's why I didn't say anything. Ben ran a hand through his hair. And then the longer I waited, the harder it became to tell you the truth. I was afraid of losing what we had. So instead, you let me find out from a TV news report? The hurt was creeping back into her voice. Do you know how that felt? To realize everyone else knew something about you that I didn't? I was going to tell you, Ben insisted. I'd made up my mind to do it this week, but I wanted you to know me first, the real me. I don't even know which version of you is real anymore. Ben took another step toward her. They both are, Jaslyn. The man in the red flannel serving mashed potatoes at the shelter, that's me. The guy who walked you home and danced with you on New Year's Eve, that's me too. The only difference is what I do for a living and how much money I have. That doesn't change who I am. Jaslyn wanted to believe him, but doubt still nagged at her. Why me, Ben? Of all the women in Chicago, why did you choose to spend time with me? "I didn't choose you," he said simply. "It just happened. I walked into that shelter looking for something. Peace, maybe. A way to honor Claire. I never expected to meet someone who would change everything." His sincerity was hard to doubt. Jaslyn felt her resolve weakening. "I need time, Ben. This is a lot to process." He nodded, disappointment clear in his eyes but respecting her request. "I understand. For what it's worth, I am truly sorry for not being completely honest with you." As he turned to leave, Jaslyn called after him. "The shelter dinner, was that really the first time you'd been there in person? Or was that a lie too?" Ben looked back at her. "It was the first time. I'd been donating anonymously for years, but after Claire died, I needed to see where the money was going, to feel connected to something real." With that, he left, the bell above the door jingling softly as it closed behind him. Mrs. Brennan emerged from the back room, eyeing Jaslyn speculatively. Well, that was quite dramatic. Despite everything, Jaslyn couldn't help but smile weakly. "My life has turned into a soap opera." "The question is," Mrs. Brennan said, settling into a chair beside her, "what happens in the next episode?" The following days passed in a blur. Jaslyn threw herself into work, trying not to think about Ben. He didn't call or text, respecting her request for space. But his absence left a void that she couldn't ignore. She found herself looking for him whenever she entered the shelter, hoping to see that red flannel shirt among the volunteers. But he never appeared. On Friday afternoon, Martha pulled her aside. "There's something you should see." She led Jaslyn to the shelter's small office and handed her a newspaper. The business section featured a large photograph of Ben, looking every inch the powerful CEO in a tailored suit, with the headline, "Ashford Returns, Billionaire Back at Helm After Mystery Absence." "He's going back to his real life," Jaslyn said softly. Martha gave her a long look. "That doesn't mean he's forgotten about you." "It doesn't matter. We're from different worlds, Martha. It would never work. That's just fear talking, honey, and fear is a poor advisor." Before Jaslyn could respond, another volunteer burst into the office. "Martha, you need to see this." They followed him to the main room, where a group had gathered around the shelter's small television. A news reporter stood outside a modern glass building with the Ashford Technologies logo. "The surprise announcement has sent shockwaves through the business community," the reporter was saying. "Benjamin Ashford, who returned to his position as CEO just days ago, has pledged $20 million to establish a network of transition centers for homeless individuals throughout Chicago." Jaslyn froze, her eyes fixed on the screen as it cut to footage of Ben at a press conference. These centers will provide not just temporary shelter, but comprehensive support, job training, education, healthcare, and permanent housing assistance, Ben was saying, his voice confident but his eyes tired. "Everyone deserves a chance to rebuild their life with dignity." A reporter called out, "Mr. Ashford, what inspired this initiative?" The camera zoomed in on Ben's face, and for a moment Jaslyn saw vulnerability break through his professional facade. "Someone very special showed me that true change happens one person at a time," he said. "This is for her." The shelter erupted in excited chatter, but Jaslyn couldn't hear any of it over the pounding of her heart. She slipped away, needing to be alone with her thoughts. Outside, she walked aimlessly through the cold streets, Ben's words echoing in her mind. This is for her. She knew he meant her, knew he was trying to make her dream a reality, even if she wasn't part of his life anymore. It was grand, extravagant, and exactly what she would expect from Benjamin Ashford, billionaire CEO. But it was also thoughtful, meaningful, and driven by genuine compassion. Exactly what she would expect from Ben, the man in the red flannel shirt. Maybe they were the same person after all. Ben sat alone in his office on the top floor of Ashford Tower, surrounded by floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a panoramic view of Chicago. He had been back at work for nearly a week, throwing himself into the Transition Center project with single-minded focus. It was all he could do to keep from thinking about Jaslyn. He had given her the space she asked for, though every day without her felt like an eternity. He hoped she had seen the press conference, that she understood what he was trying to do. Not to buy her forgiveness, he knew her well enough to know that wouldn't work, but to show her that she had changed him, had helped him find purpose again. A knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. Elaine entered, her usual efficient self. "The architects are here with the preliminary designs for the first transition center." "Send them in," Ben said, straightening his tie. "Also," Elaine added more hesitantly, "there's someone else here. I'd see you. She doesn't have an appointment." Ben's heart leaped. "Who is it?" "A Mrs. Brennan. She says she owns a bookshop. Not who he had hoped for, but intriguing nonetheless." "Send her in first, please." Mrs. Brennan entered a moment later, looking around the luxurious office with undisguised curiosity. My, quite a step up from my little shop." Ben smiled, genuinely pleased to see her. "Mrs. Brennan, this is a surprise." "I imagine it is." She settled into a chair across from his desk, studying him with those shrewd eyes. "You look tired, young man." "It's been a busy week." I saw your press conference. Very impressive." "Thank you." Mrs. Brennan got straight to the point. "She misses you, you know, though she's too stubborn to admit it." Ben's grip tightened on his pen. "How is she?" "About as miserable as you look." Mrs. Brennan's expression softened. "She's confused, Ben. Hurt, but mostly afraid." "Afraid of what?" "Of not being enough. Of being a temporary chapter in your story. The poor girl from the wrong side of town who caught a billionaire's attention for a few weeks." Ben leaned forward. "That's not what she is to me, not at all. I believe you, but Jaslyn has spent her whole life being left behind by people who were supposed to care about her. Her mother, then her father, though not by choice. She's learned to protect herself by keeping people at a distance." "I understand that," Ben said quietly. "Better than you might think," Mrs. Brennan nodded. "I thought you might. That's why I'm here." She reached into her large handbag and pulled out a worn leather book. This was Tom Carter's, Jaslyn's father, his journal. She gave it to me after he died. Said she couldn't bear to read it yet. "I've been keeping it safe for when she's ready." She placed it on Ben's desk. "There's an entry in here from about 10 years ago. Tom worked briefly as a landscaper for an estate on the North Shore, the Ashford estate." Ben stared at the journal, surprised. "I don't remember. You were probably away at college. But he wrote about meeting a kind man who took the time to talk with his workers, who asked about their families, who cared about more than just how well they trimmed his hedges." "My father," Ben said softly. Mrs. Brennan nodded. "Richard Ashford. Made quite an impression on Tom Carter. Gave him hope that not all wealthy people were out of touch with reality. That some remembered what it meant to be human." She stood, smoothing her skirt. "The apple doesn't fall far from the tree, does it?" Ben was at a loss for words. Mrs. Brennan headed for the door, then turned back. "Jaslyn works the dinner shift at the shelter tonight. Alone. Just thought you might want to know." After she left, Ben sat motionless, staring at the journal. Then he picked up his phone. "Elaine, tell the architects I need to reschedule, and find me a red flannel shirt." Jaslyn moved through the shelter, kitchen on autopilot, preparing for the evening meal service. Martha had scheduled her to work alone tonight. Unusual, but not unheard of for a slow Friday in January. She stirred the large pot of stew on the stove, her mind elsewhere. The past week had been a roller coaster of emotions, pride in what Ben was doing with the transition centers, longing for the easy companionship they had shared, and underneath it all, a growing realization that perhaps she had been too hasty in pushing him away. The back door opened, letting in a gust of cold air. Jaslyn didn't look up, assuming it was Martha returning from her errand. "The stew's almost ready," she said. "I just need to slice the bread." "Need a hand with that." Jaslyn froze, the wooden spoon suspended mid-stir. She knew that voice. Slowly, she turned around. Ben stood in the doorway wearing a red flannel shirt and jeans, just as he had the first night they met. His hair was slightly tousled from the wind, his eyes uncertain as they met hers. "Ben," she breathed, "what are you doing here?" "Volunteering," he said simply. If that's still allowed. Jaslyn's heart hammered in her chest. "I saw the press conference about the transition centers. What did you think?" "It's amazing. A dream come true for so many people." Ben took a step closer. "But what about your dream, Jaslyn? You're the one who inspired it all." She looked away. "I'm sure you had plenty of experts helping you plan it." "None." who understood it like you do. Another step closer. I want you to run it. Her head snapped up. What? The first center. I want you to be in charge, not because we have a history, but because no one else has your vision, your heart for the people it will serve. Jaslyn shook her head, overwhelmed. I don't have the experience, the qualifications. You have everything that matters. Ben was directly in front of her now. The rest you can learn. She looked up at him, searching his face. Is this why you came back? To offer me a job? No. His voice was soft but sure. I came back because every day without you has been empty. Because I miss your smile, your laugh, the way you see the good in everyone, because I'm in love with you, Jaslyn Carter. The wooden spoon clattered to the floor as Jaslyn's hand flew to her mouth. You can't just say things like that. Why not? It's the truth, and I promised myself no more hiding the truth from you. He reached for her hands, holding them gently in his. I know I hurt you. I know trust is hard for you. But I'm asking for a second chance. Not as Benjamin Ashford or just Ben, but as all of me. The complete, complicated, imperfect person I am. Tears welled in Jaslyn's eyes. I've been so afraid. Of what? That it wasn't real. That once you went back to your world of board meetings and billion-dollar deals, you'd realize what a mistake you'd made slumming it with someone like me. Ben's expression grew fierce. Don't ever say that again. There is nothing slumming about loving you. You are the most genuine, compassionate, strong person I have ever known. He let go of her hands to cup her face. These past weeks, serving mashed potatoes and walking through snowy streets with you, have been the most real moments of my life. More real than any board meeting or charity gala could ever be. But our worlds are so different, Jaslyn whispered. They don't have to be. Ben's thumb gently wiped away a tear from her cheek. My world can be your world can be mine. We can build a new one together. The timer on the stove buzzed, breaking the moment. Jaslyn laughed through her tears. The stew. Ben reached past her to turn off the heat. Let it wait. And then he was kissing her, his arms wrapping around her waist, pulling her close. Jaslyn melted into him, all the doubt and fear dissolving in the warmth of his embrace. This felt right. This felt real. When they finally broke apart, Ben rested his forehead against hers. So, Ms. Carter, what do you say? Are you willing to give the billionaire in the red flannel shirt another chance? Jaslyn smiled, her heart lighter than it had been in days. On one condition. Name it. You have to help me serve this stew. We've got hungry people waiting. Ben laughed, the sound filling the kitchen with joy. Deal. Together they turned back to the stove, standing shoulder to shoulder as they prepared to serve those in need, just as they had on the Christmas Eve when they first met. Only now, there were no secrets between them, no personas to maintain, just Ben and Jaslyn finding in each other what they had both been searching for all along, a place to belong and someone to belong to. Spring came early to Chicago that year. By mid-March, the snow had melted, and the first green shoots were pushing through the soil in the city parks. For Jaslyn, it felt symbolic, a new beginning after the long winter. The past 2 months had been a whirlwind. After their reunion, at the shelter, she and Ben had taken things one day at a time, rebuilding their trust slowly but surely. Ben had been open about everything, his company, his wealth, his past, and Jaslyn had worked to overcome her fears, to believe that what they had was real and lasting. Today was a milestone. The groundbreaking ceremony for the first Ashford Transition Center was being held in a formerly abandoned building just 3 blocks from St. Martin's shelter. Jaslyn stood to the side of the small stage that had been set up for the occasion, watching as city officials, journalists, and community members gathered. Nervous? Martha asked, joining her. Jaslyn nodded. A little. I still can't believe this is happening. Believe it, honey. Martha squeezed her arm. You deserve this. Ben approached, looking handsome in a suit, but with his red flannel shirt, visible underneath the jacket, a personal touch that made Jaslyn smile. It had become something of a trademark for him in recent months, a reminder of where their story began. Ready? He asked, taking her hand. As I'll ever be. They walked together to the stage where the mayor was preparing to speak. Cameras flashed, and Jaslyn saw her face projected on the large screens set up for the event. It was surreal. The bookshop clerk from the wrong side of town, now the director of a multi-million-dollar community project. The mayor spoke about urban renewal and community partnership, then introduced Ben, who stepped forward to address the crowd. "Thank you all for coming today," he began. "This project represents more than just a building. It represents a belief that everyone deserves a chance to rebuild their life with dignity and support." His eyes found Jaslyn's as he continued. "I've been fortunate in my life, but true fortune isn't measured in dollars and cents. It's measured in the connections we make, the lives we touch, the love we give and receive." The crowd applauded, and Ben gestured for Jaslyn to join him at the podium. She took a deep breath and stepped forward. "Good morning," she said, her voice steady despite the butterflies in her stomach. "My name is Jaslyn Carter, and I'll be serving as the director of the Ashford Transition Center." She looked out at the sea of faces, some familiar from the shelter, others strangers who would soon become part of this new community. 2 years ago, I lost my father. He was my only family, and suddenly I was alone in the world. But I found a new family at St. Martin's Shelter. I learned that community can heal us when we're broken, lift us when we fall, and remind us that we're never truly alone. Ben stood beside her, his presence giving her strength. That's what this center will be, a community where people can find not just resources, but connection, where they can rebuild not just their circumstances, but their sense of belonging. After the speeches, Ben and Jaslyn joined the mayor and other officials for the ceremonial groundbreaking, each taking a turn with the gold-painted shovel. Cameras flashed again, capturing the moment for tomorrow's newspapers. Ms. Carter, a reporter pushed forward. "How does it feel to go from shelter volunteer to running a multi-million-dollar facility?" Jaslyn hesitated, but Ben's hand, at the small of her back, steadied her. "It feels like exactly where I'm supposed to be," she said simply. Another reporter called out, "Mr. Ashford, is it true you met Ms. Carter while volunteering incognito at a homeless shelter?" Ben smiled. "I wasn't incognito, I was just being myself." The questions continued, but Ben skillfully steered them back to the project itself, away from their personal relationship. They had agreed to keep that part of their lives as private as possible. Later, as the crowd dispersed and workers began removing the stage, Ben pulled Jaslyn aside. "You were amazing," he said, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "How does it feel?" "Overwhelming," she admitted. "But in a good way." He smiled, his eyes crinkling at the corners in the way she loved. "I have a surprise for you, a post-groundbreaking celebration." "Ben, you didn't need to. I wanted to." He took her hand. "Come on." He led her to where his driver waited with the car, a concession to his public role that still made Jaslyn uncomfortable sometimes. As they drove through the city, Ben kept checking his watch, which piqued her curiosity. "Are we on a schedule?" she asked. "Sort of." He looked excited, like a child with a secret. "We're almost there." The car pulled up in front of Brennan's bookshop. Jaslyn turned to Ben, confused. "Why are we here?" "You'll see." He helped her out of the car and led her to the door, which was strangely locked in the middle of a business day. Ben produced a key, another surprise, and opened the door. Inside, the shop was dark. "Ben, what's going on? Where's Mrs. Brennan?" He flipped on the lights and Jaslyn gasped. The bookshop had been transformed. The sagging shelves had been replaced with beautiful new oak ones. The worn carpet was gone, revealing polished hardwood floors. New lighting fixtures cast a warm glow over everything, and a cozy seating area with plush armchairs had been added in one corner. "Surprise!" Mrs. Brennan emerged from the back room, beaming. "What do you think?" Jaslyn turned in a slow circle, taking it all in. "It's beautiful, but how? When?" "Ben approached me last month," Mrs. Brennan explained. "Said he wanted to invest in the shop, keep it going for another generation." Jaslyn looked at Ben, who shrugged with a small smile. "You told me this place was important to you, that Mrs. Brennan was like family. I wanted to make sure it stayed around." Tears filled Jaslyn's eyes. It wasn't the grand gesture of the transition center. It was something more personal, more intimate. He had listened, really listened, to what mattered to her. "There's more," Mrs. Brennan said. "Show her, Ben." Ben led Jaslyn to a new door at the back of the shop that she hadn't noticed before. "This connects to the space next door. We've expanded." He opened the door to reveal a bright, cheerful room filled with small tables and chairs, bookshelves, sized for children, and colorful reading nooks. "A children's reading room," Mrs. Brennan explained, "for story hours, tutoring, school visits, and this," she pointed to a plaque on the wall, "is what makes it special." Jaslyn moved closer to read the engraved words, "The Thomas Carter Memorial Reading Room, where stories come to life." "Dad," she whispered, her fingers tracing her father's name. "He loved books," Mrs. Brennan said softly. "Loved sharing them with you. Now his legacy can continue." Jaslyn turned to Ben, unable to speak through her tears. He pulled her into his arms, holding her close. "Thank you," she finally managed. "This means more than anything." "I know," he said simply. Mrs. Brennan discreetly slipped out, leaving them. Alone in the reading room, "You're not just investing in the transition center," Jaslyn said, looking up at him. "You're investing in everything that matters to me." Ben's eyes were serious. "Because you matter to me. All of you. Your past, your present, your dreams for the future." He led her to one of the small reading nooks, and they sat side by side, their shoulders touching. "These past months have changed me, Jaslyn. Before I met you, I was just going through the motions, building the company bigger, making more money. But for what? Since Claire died, nothing seemed to have a point." He took her hand, his thumb tracing circles on her palm. "You gave me purpose again, showed me what really matters." "You did the same for me," Jaslyn said softly. "After Dad died, I was just a surviving, not living. You helped me remember what it feels like to look forward to tomorrow." Ben reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Jaslyn's breath caught in her throat. "I had a whole speech planned," he said with a nervous laugh, "about time and patience and building something that lasts. But sitting here in this room named for your father, I realize there's only one thing I need to say." He opened the box to reveal a ring, not the ostentatious diamond she might have expected from a billionaire, but a simple, elegant emerald set in white gold. "I chose green because it matches your eyes," Ben said. "The eyes I want to look into every morning for the rest of my life." He slid from the bench to one knee, holding the ring up to her. "Jaslyn Carter, I love you. Will you marry me?" Time seemed to stand still. Jaslyn looked at Ben, the billionaire CEO in a business suit with a red flannel shirt underneath, kneeling on the floor of a children's reading room named after her father. It was ridiculous and perfect and absolutely right. "Yes," she said, her voice catching. "Yes, I'll marry you." His face lit up with joy as he slipped the ring onto her finger. Then he was beside her again, pulling her into a kiss that held all the promise of their future together. When they finally broke apart, Jaslyn rested her head on his shoulder. "I can already hear what people will say. The billionaire and the bookshop girl. Like some kind of modern fairy tale." Ben chuckled. "Let them talk, we know the truth." "And what's that?" "That money had nothing to do with it. That we found each other when we both needed someone to remind us what matters most." Jaslyn looked around the reading room, thinking of her father and how much he would have loved this place, how proud he would have been of her. "I never expected any of this," she said. "The center, the bookshop, you. It feels like a dream." "It's real," Ben assured her. "All of it." A knock at the door interrupted them. Mrs. Brennan peeked in. "Sorry to disturb, but there are some people here who want to congratulate you." I tried to hold them off, but the door pushed open wider to reveal Martha from the shelter, along with Elaine and several of the regular volunteers. They burst into applause when they saw the ring on Jaslyn's finger. "I knew it," Martha crowed. "Didn't I tell you they were perfect for each other?" Mrs. Brennan nodded sagely. "From the moment I saw them together." "Wait," Jaslyn said, looking from one smiling face to another. "You all knew this was happening today?" "Of course, dear," Mrs. Brennan said. "Who do you think helped Ben set all this up while you were busy with the groundbreaking preparations?" Ben looked slightly sheepish. "I might have enlisted some help." "We've Got champagne waiting, Martha announced, and those little sandwiches Ben ordered from that fancy place downtown. As they moved back into the main part of the bookshop, now filled with their closest friends, Jaslyn felt a sense of completion. The people she loved were all here, celebrating not just her engagement, but the new community they had built together. Happy, Ben whispered in her ear as Martha began pouring champagne. "More than I ever thought possible," Jaslyn replied, leaning into his embrace. 6 months later, on a crisp autumn day, Jaslyn stood at the entrance of the newly completed Ashford Transition Center. The building had been transformed from a derelict eyesore to a beacon of hope, with large windows, a welcoming entrance, and gardens planted by community volunteers. Inside, everything was ready for the grand opening tomorrow. The dormitories, with their comfortable beds and private storage spaces, the classrooms equipped with computers and training materials, the medical clinic staffed by volunteer doctors and nurses, the career center where residents would get help finding jobs and housing. Jaslyn had poured her heart into every detail, drawing on her own experiences and the wisdom of people like Martha, who had been working with the homeless community for decades. Ben had provided the resources and stepped back, trusting her vision completely. She felt his presence before she saw him, a warmth at her side that had become as familiar as her own heartbeat. "Nervous about tomorrow?" he asked. "A little," she admitted. "What if it doesn't work? What if we can't really help them?" Ben wrapped an arm around her shoulders. "We'll learn. We'll adjust. We'll keep trying until we get it right." They walked through the center together, making one final check of the facilities. In the main common area, a wall of photographs caught Jaslyn's eye. Pictures of the shelter, the volunteers, the community that had made this place possible in Nye. The center was a framed image of a man in a red flannel shirt, serving mashed potatoes at a shelter dinner line. "Where did you get this?" Jaslyn asked, surprised. "Martha had it. Apparently she took it that first night. Thought we looked cute, working together." Ben smiled at the memory. "I didn't even know you yet, but look," he pointed to the photo where his gaze was clearly fixed on Jaslyn, not on the dinner line. "You were watching me," she said softly. "I couldn't look away. There was something about you, right from the start." Jaslyn leaned against him, reflecting on the journey that had brought them here, from that snowy Christmas Eve to this moment, on the verge of making her dream a reality. "I have something for you," Ben said, reaching into his jacket pocket. "A wedding present a little early." He handed her a small gift-wrapped package. Jaslyn opened it carefully to find a leather-bound journal, similar to the one her father had kept. "Open it," Ben urged. Inside, on the first page, was a handwritten note for Jaslyn to record our story as it unfolds. The real story, not of a billionaire and a bookshop girl, but of two people who found each other when they needed it most. "All my love, always, Ben." "It's perfect," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "I thought we could write in it together. The good days, the hard ones, all of it." "Our story," Jaslyn said, running her fingers over the blank pages that waited to be filled. "Which reminds me," Ben said, checking his watch. "If we don't leave now, we'll be late for our own rehearsal. Dinner." They walked out of the center, hand in hand, locking the door behind them. Tomorrow it would open to welcome its first residents, but tonight was about celebrating their journey together. Ben's driver waited at the curb, but Jaslyn tugged Ben's hand in the opposite direction. "Let's walk. It's not far, and it's such a beautiful evening." The sun was setting over the city, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. As they walked, Jaslyn thought about the path that had led her here, the losses and heartaches, the unexpected joys, the twists of fate that had brought Ben into her life on that cold Christmas Eve. "Penny for your thoughts," Ben said, squeezing her hand. Jaslyn smiled up at him. "I was just thinking about tomorrow, the center opening, our wedding next month, all these new beginnings." "Scared?" "No," she said, and realized it was true. "Not when I'm with you." Ben pulled her close for a moment, kissing the top of her head. "That's good, because I plan to be with you for a very long time, Mrs. Almost Ashford." Jaslyn laughed. "I still can't believe I'm going to be Jaslyn Ashford. It sounds so fancy." "You'll always be my girl from the shelter," Ben said with a teasing smile. "The one who didn't know she was serving mashed potatoes to a billionaire." "And "You'll always be my man in the red flannel shirt," Jaslyn replied. "The one who taught me that people aren't always what they seem on the surface." They continued walking, their steps in perfect sync, toward the restaurant where their friends and family waited to celebrate with them. Behind them, the transition center stood as a testament to what they had built together. Ahead of them stretched a future filled with possibility. As they rounded the corner, Jaslyn paused for a moment, looking back at the path they had traveled. "What is it?" Ben asked. "Just taking it all in," she said. "Making sure I remember this moment." Ben smiled, understanding in his eyes. "Some moments stay with you forever." Like a snowy Christmas Eve, a sheltered dinner line, and a beautiful volunteer who changed everything. Hand in hand, they walked on into the gathering dusk, their story, like the journal Ben had given her, still being written one day at a time. Not a fairy tale, but something better, something real. A love that had begun with two lonely souls finding connection on a cold winter night. A billionaire who found his purpose again. A woman who discovered that dreams really can come true. And a red flannel shirt that had brought them together, reminding them both that what matters most isn't what you have, but who you are when no one's looking. The end.